Welcome to today's Tech Talk on the consumerization of enterprises, a security conundrum. I'm pleased to be here today to introduce Dr. Chenzi Wang, who's a principal analyst with Forrester Research, primarily focused on application and content security as well as vulnerability management. Dr. Wang earned her PhD in computer science from the University of Virginia and spent 5 years as an associate research professor at Carnegie Mellon University, where she published numerous papers on distributed systems and network security. She was also instrumental in the founding of CMU's Scilab. After giving up on the academic life or transitioning into the business world, she was the chief science officer for KSR, which was a security risk assessment service provider here in the Bay Area, and from there she moved on to Forrester. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Wang on several projects, and so I'm very pleased to be up here today to introduce Dr. Chenzi Wang.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you guys for coming. I know everybody has busy days, so it's a pleasure to be here. I have a lot of friends who work at Google, so it's always fun to come visit. So what are we going to talk about today? Consumerization for enterprises is a hot topic that we often talk to customers, and obviously Google, as your company, other company in this sector, will be interested in this topic as well. So last year, soon after iPhone came out, one of our analysts wrote a report on how iPhone is not ready for enterprise. And as soon as that report came out, his manager spent half a day on the phone dealing with angry phone calls from Apple and a few other journalists. And it was a big brouhaha at the time. He made some really good points in the report, such as seamless integration with enterprise apps were not there. Support for calendar syncs, support for central management of the device from the enterprise standpoint was not there. Well, talked about central management. Remote troubleshooting capabilities were not there. So several of these capabilities were fixed in the second generation iPhone. And this analyst, although he made a really good point, several good points, he also made one recommendation to IT organizations. Do not support iPhone. That was his recommendation. And it was met with very mixed reviews. Although I agreed with many of the points he made, I disagreed with his recommendation of do not support iPhone for the very reason that iPhone was in enterprises already, regardless if IT was consenting or not. So as you guys, probably everyone here have an iPhone, right? Do you have the second generation iPhone? No? Maybe you've upgraded the firmware, right? Okay. So the point I brought up this example is that consumer technologies are increasingly seeping into enterprises, regardless with the consent of IT or the management. We did a survey about over 100 CIOs, I think was late last year. And we asked them about different Web 2.0 technologies. And we asked them why you adopt these technologies in your enterprise for business purposes. Top one reason these CIOs responded was it improves the efficiency of their business. And several things in here, for instance, solves a problem at our company. We'll get into why it provides a new platform, new computing vehicle solving problems. But increasing the efficiency of business was the #1 reason these people felt that these Web 2.0 and consumerization technologies were useful. So what consumer technology is being adopted today? We are in the business, as Forrester Research, we're in the business for market research. So this is what we track. Things such as real-time communication platforms, voice over IP, unified communication, information sharing platforms, not necessarily real-time communication. The last one's interesting. New business-to-business and business-to-consumer methods. Things like widgets and gadgets gives you a new viral communication from business to consumers, business to customers. We'll get into some examples later. We also did a software survey, which we do every year. This data came out of about 850 software decision makers in North America and Europe. We asked them what type of Web 2.0 tools and technologies your applications are, your employees are using at work, with or without your explicit support. And the result, this is actually a fairly large scale survey. We've done some limited surveys in limited industry sectors, which the number actually came out much higher. It's between 20 and 40%. Here's is somewhat smaller, but it's a small but concerning number of employees actually using those consumer technologies at work for work purposes. Okay? We also asked, in the same survey, we asked about different types of technologies people are adopting today. Collaboration has clearly become part of enterprise fabric. We asked whether you're likely to implement collaboration as part of your 2008 investment priority. And about 50%, so you look at this graph, the yellow one is a priority, the brown one is critical, the brown one is priority, the yellow one is critical priority. Add together, it's about 50%. Nearly 50% of the businesses we interviewed say it's a priority for them to implement collaboration technologies for business in 2008. Okay? So that is not a trivial number. Another point about collaboration. People are building serious applications on top of collaboration platforms. These are not just a team of developers getting together, sharing documents. EasyJet is building a crew portal. This is about pushing real-time information onto the portal, telling their flight crews where you're going to go, which gate your flight's going to take off, what time. These are mission-critical applications. AMD is building a global partner site, sharing information about products, about supply chains on collaboration platform is also a critical application to their business. ExoStar is a third-party collaboration platform vendor, and they host applications for members to share many, many different design documents, multi-company workflows. I recently was at their conference, and I saw some of the applications being shared, and I was very surprised. People are sharing airplane design documents and CAD graphs on top of these open collaboration platforms, and it's in a multi-to-multi collaboration configuration. So remember, one of the things we talked earlier is it fosters new business-to-business and business-to-customer channel. So think about it. For a business to reach their customers, the bandwidth is incredibly limited today. What are the channels that your bank, for instance, can get a hold of you? Your bank can send you email, which will probably get filtered out by a spam filter. They can send you snail mail, which the return rate is incredibly low. They could do web portal, but how many times, everybody's got a web portal now. How many times do you go to your bank's website? I go probably, I don't know, twice a month to pay my bills and organize my account, but that's not a lot of time I spent on their website. The businesses love to get a bigger channel to reach their customers, and some of the Web 2.0 tools provide this capability for them. So one of the very nice examples we've found, are you guys familiar with the Random House widgets? Anybody here know about that? So Random House is a publishing house, right? So what they do is they have this, I thought, very interesting use of widgets. They provide this widgets for bookstores, okay? And it tells you in real time, this is desktop widget, tells you in real time real time is every day, the best-selling books in your zip code. Okay? And as a bookstore owner, you can take a look at this every day and say, oh, these are the top 10 books in my zip code that people are buying. And then this widget, as the graph here, has a link to order books, to browse books, to browse the author's other books on the hot selling list. So it allows the business owners real-time business pertinent information. They don't have to go to Random House's website to proactively pull information, and they probably won't do it as often as the real-time information push. This gives a new viral distribution channel from the business to their customers. And it's one of the really nice examples I've seen as widgets being used for information distribution. Random House also has a very extensive web service backend. It's a very impressive effort to digitize and indexing their digital content in order to provide this kind of consumer gadget-based interface. This is an example from a publishing house to their customers. But think about it. A number of years ago, you guys probably won't relate to this, but I spent the summer running from different stores, checking a particular Gucci handbag that I was interested in, checking on when that particular handbag is going to go on sale, on foot, go from different stores. I would love to have a widget, a channel, whereby it pushes the information to me on my desktop, tells me when this thing's going to go on sale. I still don't have this capability today. Who's going to give me that? I would love to do that. And I'm just one kind of consumer for a particular kind of consumer goods. There are many, many other examples of this. So who's going to provide this? Financial services firms, I talk to banks all the time. Every bank has a little team of people are looking at these Web 2.0 technologies and are investigating how they can capitalize on this. One very obvious one is they can reach the customers in a more real-time fashion. And by using widgets or gadgets that, for instance, may be embedded onto iGoogle, or embedded onto Facebook, to display account balance, for instance, or perhaps the last 5 transactions happened on my account, stock trading alerts, and they could, by display this information, also display potentially a new financial services offering. So that is the marketing channel that they can get to you. So perhaps when I log on to my iGoogle, I live in Mountain View, very close to here. So perhaps instead of seeing the regular information, I could see my account balance here. These are obviously fictitious accounts, but or maybe there's a logging widget I will log in first. But I could see these informations right away. And since I go to iGoogle every day, I'm already there. The business can get hold of this real estate. Perhaps, so essentially what happens is the enterprise will have some kind of proprietary data sitting in their database, and now it's being pulled onto a web services front end, which then gets pushed onto different consumer technologies, such as iPhones, such as widgets, such as RSS, that can then channel out to customers. And these can be business customers, can be consumers. So this channel can foster new businesses, perhaps new social structures. However, organizations are also very wary of Web 2.0 and consumer technologies being adopted for business purposes. And they tell us the #1 concern is security. Fear of losing control, and also for some applications, ROI is not essentially clear. However, your employees are increasingly asking about it, customers are increasingly asking about, and the business case is starting to build very compelling. If you think about the Random House example, it's a very compelling business case. So enterprise IT is basically pressured from both sides. One's from employee and customers, and potentially from the marketing department. The other one's from the regulations and management wants control. So those two sides fundamentally in conflict. The conflict arises from security and controls are top of mind for management and for enterprise computing. So think about enterprise apps. So are you guys, what groups are you guys from? I'm sorry? Enterprise. So you're probably familiar with it. You can probably answer this question. So if you go to sell an enterprise application, what are the top 4 things that people ask for? Come on. Yes. Yes, control of data. Enterprises want control. And I want to control too. As a consumer, I want to control my own data. But as an enterprise, the control issue is even more paramount. So typically, you want a policy enforcement in a centralized manner, in a scalable manner, right? You don't want it for every application, for every system, you have to go and configure the policy. You really want to do so in a centralized manner. Scalable, auditable, repeatable method. And you want to maintain control, exactly like gentleman said, maintain control over information. Data has to be kept private. Some data have to be kept confidential and private, and others have to have proper access control capabilities associated with it, and auditing who's accessing what data. Compliance. Now, you guys probably don't hear about compliance a lot, but I deal with that every day because that's what the management of companies deal with. Obtain visibility of activities. So many of the consumer tools today don't offer you this because consumer tools at the core is designed to be convenient, flexible, personable, and give you efficient interactions to do whatever you want to do, not to give the other side control. So that is in fundamental conflict. So that is why this is what I'm seeing when I log on to my Facebook. This is my actual Facebook page. And this is what I'm seeing when I'm at work. See the difference between the 2 experiences? It's huge. Why do I have to deal with this every day? Because that's what my enterprise, my corporate is using, okay? The experience gap, though, my prediction is it will disappear. It will not happen tomorrow. There's no reason that I have to deal with disparate user interfaces and disparate experiences going to use my consumer applications versus my enterprise applications. The consumerization, again, going back to the topic, is definitely happening. Why it will continue to happen? Enterprises will benefit from the collaboration and the increased productivity. Users will benefit from convergence of knowledge, technology, and interaction methods. So that's why this trend will continue. So perhaps meet the future me. Well, perhaps I should use a older picture, but that's what I have. In fact, this may be a slightly younger picture. Anyway, so I work with a team of people that located around the globe. It's not like my team's actually there. I do have a distributed team, but I just picked a few places that I actually like to go visit. So these are my distributed team members, okay? The way I do business, my team has a project blog, okay? And each member of my team will subscribe to this blog via RSS, so information will get pushed out to us. Our external partners, our customers, will subscribe to our site via RSS, and they get to see limited information. Our team meeting is conducted via web conferencing, and it's saved as a podcast. So my team member in Australia, in Asia, can wake up and listen to it later. They don't have to be there in real time. And they can subscribe to the podcast using RSS as well. Our team blog is potentially linked to Wikipedia. And every time a new document, we write lots of documents, come up, the terms that can be looked up using Wikipedia right there. I can synchronize my calendar with remote colleagues and my partners and customers using my iPhone or use the office communication service that we have. All these technologies available today. We're not doing business this way. I'm certainly not talking to my colleagues in Australia via RSS and web conferencing maybe, but in a very ad hoc manner. There is no platform support for this type of interaction. So these are the tools that the future Chenxi will be using instead of Outlook, instead of the archaic-looking Siebel interface that I showed you earlier. So when I log on to iGoogle, for instance, again, instead of seeing the bank balance, which I took it off for space reasons, I may see my corporate calendar. Okay? Maybe it's one calendar that I use for my corporate activities as well as personal activities. I may have a link to the team blog via RSS, and it will show me the tunnel into the corporate Siebel database. All this is doable today. And obviously, we're not doing it. But who else is doing it? Or how soon will we actually see this sort of thing happen? My other portal to both business applications and personal and consumer applications is this. Yeah. Maybe not iGoogle, maybe not Facebook, maybe this, or maybe all three of them. So what we need to make that vision happen, what do we need is personalized, secure data delivery from back-end corporate databases, applications, whatever content living in my corporate network, through some kind of infrastructure that does unified authentication, authorization, and content delivery using a personalized, secure mechanism that delivers onto whatever application I'm using today. Maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's iPhone, maybe it's iGoogle, maybe it's whatever chat information I'm using. Okay? So this seems to me is a vision that we could get there pretty fast, pretty soon. However, perhaps, okay, so let me back up. This is what I think should happen. Perhaps this should happen in slightly more complex way or slightly more interesting way. I am there using my consumer technologies. I contact a server, potentially a server that I go to an iGoogle server or a Facebook server, and I said using an understood language, I want to access my enterprise application. And this iGoogle server then contacts my corporate server, which they engage in an exchange. They understand each other's language. And this guy, this server, iGoogle server, will then contact some other server to understand, for instance, my stored tagging and bookmarking information and understand how I want the content to be delivered. Okay? And then we'll pull information from the backend database using the tagging and using the bookmarking information it has acquired about me to real-time deliver the information in a way that I would appreciate and I would want to use. Perhaps this is what should happen. Any questions so far? Yes? No? This is crap, or this is pretty good, or this is, oh, we've already thought about this. Yeah? Yes?
What can you characterize a little bit more on what we mean by enterprise information? Enterprise information can be any number of things, desktop or web applications.
Yes.
Your ERP systems.
Yeah.
Your CRM systems.
Right.
Are we talking about a transport protocol here, or are we talking about the application logic?
I intentionally left it kind of vague for the reason that I didn't want to point to a specific set of applications that are more amenable for this. In theory, you can do this for anything. Okay? Anything that can speak to a web services language that you could offer this type of data delivery. Now today, a lot of enterprise applications have web front ends, so you can go to a web portal. But I really don't want to confuse this with the web-enabled SAP, for instance. What I want to say is this is, let's just say, a generic enterprise application. It could be web-enabled, or maybe it's not. What we want to do is pull out the information in a way that can be easily merged into a consumer application to allow users or customers to consume it. Okay? So how far are we to this vision, to things that a consumer using maybe browser-based technology or maybe other consumer technologies to access any type of information in a universal, in a consistent way, without having to say, this is my enterprise application, this is my consumer application. We won't really get there if this kind of thing keeps happening. Anybody recognize this particular incident? I apologize for the blurriness of the text here. This is an attack happened on an actual Italian bank's website. This bank, this is the user login screen. And this bank's website was compromised. Attackers exploited a cross-site scripting error and was able to inject an invisible iframe onto the top of the login screen. So to the users of this website, there's no visual cue that things have changed. But once they type in their password and user ID, the iframe captures this information and sends to a server in Taiwan. And this attack went on for several months, and nobody actually knew it was ongoing until one of the mobile users of the bank was using the mobile web to access this website. And because iframe that the attack injected didn't automatically resize itself for the mobile platform, the user actually saw some frames were misaligned. So this user called into the bank and said, hey, the interface looks weird on my phone, what's going on? Because of that complaint, the bank went to investigate the application and discovered this injected iframe. So why do I bring up this? This is a Web 2.0 site, which was subjected to an attack. And we're seeing more and more of this happening because consumer technologies, or if you could call them consumer technologies or Web 2.0 type of technologies, are being adopted without proper consideration for security in enterprises. And the vision I just presented will not happen if this continues to occur. And in fact, we're seeing, in the last year, we're seeing more and more legitimate websites participate in malware distribution. And even Google's own research points to that as well. So that is a discouraging trend. We also won't get there if this continues. This came out of Google's research report, which was published in February this year. This lists a fraction of search queries that actually resulted in at least one malicious URLs. And the time frames between March 2007 to February 2008. In March 2007, as you can see, 0.3% of queries resulted in at least one malicious URL. And that number has increased to 1.3% by February 2008. I don't know what the number it is today, but I would be very surprised if it didn't increase further. So we won't get there if this continues to happen. We also won't get there if this trend continues to happen. This is the normalized growth of malware that's reported by 3 different vendors from 2005 to 2007. Okay? And you can see a huge increase from year to year. It's over 100% growth from all three of these vendors. In fact, if you take Symantec, which is one of the not so huge increase numbers, Symantec reported in 2007, every day they discovered over 1,900 new malware instances. That's a lot of malware to deal with, okay? And it's not an easy problem to solve. So we would not get there if malware or Web 2.0 enabled malware continue to happen. So to make the vision happen, what do we need? I'm not going to go onto the slides without some interaction here. So give me some little bit of idea of what we should do. I don't know if you guys are security people or you guys enterprise ad people, but I know at least one security people here. So I'm going to ask some questions. So what do you think we need to make this vision happen? Adam.
Trust in the systems.
Oh, trust in the system. More specifically, what do you mean?
I think one of the things comes down to identity verification of where the information is coming from and where it's going.
So Adam said one of the things come down to is we need identity and verification of information, where things come from, who's accessing information. He's absolutely right. So to make the vision happen, we need quite a number of things. A row of ducks we have to line in place. So he pointed out we need identity management. Okay? We need to know who is doing what in a way that is beyond traditional identity management inside of your enterprise. It's identity management beyond simple corporate boundaries. What does that mean? That means today's term, we need what they call federated identities and single sign-on. Okay? Anybody here knows what those two means? Some people do, right? Do you know how well federated identities, that concept is adopted by the market? What? It's not very well. What? Poorly, exactly. It's poorly. Now, the concept itself is a useful concept. It basically says, let's agree on a set of languages so that I can give you an identity from my corporate directory and you can recognize it. You can give it a set of rights, right? So, but it's not being adopted widely because the set of languages, we haven't agreed on a set of languages that's very effective for us to communicate information across corporate boundaries. So perhaps identity in tomorrow's this vision is an on-demand evaluation, okay? And let's get a little bit more specific here. On-demand evaluation means identity materials define what the identity materials mean. Perhaps it's user ID and password, but I would guess that would not be enough. Perhaps it's a key material that you possess in the smart card, combined with some temporal characters, time of the day, your previous transactions, your previous knowledge of what you do, where you are, GPS information, remember the iPhone. Corporate information perhaps is available on demand. Based on your identity materials, we may be able to pull some corporate information from you from your corporate server. All these, I only listed 4 categories. Maybe there are more. Is there more information that you can use in real time to arrive to an identity assessment that will allow you to do fine-grained access control to enterprise information? Yeah. So the question is, he said, I don't see how this can solve what? The Italian bank's problem. Exactly. He's right. So he said he doesn't see how this can solve the Italian bank's problem. He's right. The Italian bank's problem is due to a poorly coded program. Okay? It's because the program, the web application, has a cross-site scripting errors. So this is what we need is only the first screen of what we need. Okay? There are a few others down that you're getting ahead of me.
So can I try one?
Sure.
You're taking down the values because by doing a single sign-on, you're basically saying if your identity gets compromised on one side, then there goes a whole versus just a retirement bank.
Right. So this gentleman pointed out that the ineffectiveness of single sign-on. A single sign-on, if your identity is compromised on one site, it could be compromised in many different sites. That's why on this slide I listed today, identity management beyond your corporate boundary means federated identity and single sign-on. So that's today. But tomorrow, perhaps identity is evaluated on demand. Okay? It's not limited to just single sign-on and federated identity. Rather, it's whatever the application demands, how I need to evaluate you as an identity, as somebody who's accessing my information right now. Okay? It could be a single sign-on kind of configuration. Or it could be, I may have intelligence that this single sign-on identity could be compromised at some point in the past. I will want to engage in an extra challenge and response session to get more confidence in order to serve you the application data. Okay, and you're exactly right. That single sign-on itself doesn't solve the problem. Yes?
Taking off on that.
Mm-hmm.
One is generally the consumer code moves very fast, and federated identity management, people have been trying to do it like 20 years.
Right. Yes.
It's the opposite of moving fast.
Exactly. So the comment is that consumer market moves very fast, but the example that we use, federated identity, this whole market moves really slow. People have been trying to do it for about 10 years now and still hasn't gotten anywhere. And he's exactly right, because that means that the federated identity was because a lot of different standards were in conflict and everybody wants to get in on to identify the standards. This is not going to work if we're going to continue on the consumerization trend. So that's why the on-demand evaluation, where you can get pieces of information from existing infrastructure and arrive to a real-time decision based on these existing infrastructure information, could potentially work. Okay? Now let me just run through, how am I doing on time? 15 minutes, okay. Let me just run through some of the other high-level things we need. We need identity management in a fine-grained, in a on-demand fashion. And on-demand fashion means what? Potentially, it's identity in the cloud. Okay? It's some cloud, in the cloud provider can give you confidence and trust of a particular consumer, a client's identity. Okay? How that is exactly going to happen, it's not yet clear, but I'm putting out that vision. We also need content governance, okay? What does content governance mean? 80% of corporate content today is all unstructured, okay, as opposed to structured living in database. Content is free to move about different channels such as web, email, IM, and all these consumer communication channels that we talked about. That leads to different inbound, outbound threats that really, if you don't have a good way to deal with those, forget about consumerization, right? You are a host already. This is why you need to consider corporate content policies for each of these communication channels. Now, in the Web 2.0 enabled world, these communication channels are even more dynamic. So you need to have policy for each channel, and you need to be confident that those policies are enforced. And for instance, Postini provides outsourced email security services. And if in fact, Forrester is a customer of Postini at Google. And we need to be confident that our corporate content policy is enforced by Postini. And this is what I mean by content governance, okay? Now, one of the biggest things about working with, for instance, an in the cloud provider of these content services is to define, using their interface to define policies. because everybody's policy is different. And I advise corporations all the time on how to define policies that you can actually articulate to the service providers. A little bit more about content governance. You need policies to govern the entire life cycle of content. Generation, you run a blog site, okay? And your corporate users or your customers are contributing content to the blog. Who can contribute what content? Do you even have a policy? Do you have a way to monitor and enforce that policy? When can they contribute content? Is that a concern? Or what source of the information came from? Is that a concern? Generation of content, usage of content, access, modify, deletion, retention of content, archiving because of compliance needs, because of whatever policy, how long you have to archive, who can access this, integrity of content archive, and finally, retirement, right? So this is the entire life cycle of content, and you need to consider this in this life cycle view, and you need to have policies for each cycle, each stage of the life cycle. So in fact, we are converging on this vision that I've been talking at different venues, is the Web 2.0 security 4 centers of gravity, okay? We talked about identity management at the high level. Yes.
Your previous slide.
Yes.
Content, is that specific to archiving or in general content management?
This is actually, the question is, this slide, is this specific to content archiving, or is this for content in general? This is actually for content in general, okay? So for content that does not need to be archived, the retention policy is, no, I don't need to retain it, okay? So, but you still have to examine it from the full life cycle view, just to give you a framework to consider your policies. So the 4 centers of gravity is what I put the security issues under, okay? One of them, content governance, as we talked about, and we talked about identity management. I'm going to skip client security today because that's more of a corporate management piece. We are more talking about consumer technologies. And the next thing we're going to discuss is application security. But before I do that, let me go back to that gentleman's question earlier, comment. He said, we talked about identity management. That's not going to solve the Italian bank problem, right? What would solve the Italian bank problem? Of these 3 different centers, which security center of gravity would solve the Italian bank problem? Application security, yes. See, set it up. So this is the last center of gravity we're going to go through. So just to give you a little bit of context, I pulled some data from the National Vulnerability Database. And these are the top 4 vulnerabilities in the third quarter of 2007. So the top reported vulnerabilities, cross-site scripting, second ActiveX, all 4 of them are application level vulnerabilities. So if you look at vulnerability historical data, in the 90s, all about OS vulnerabilities and platform level vulnerabilities. Now it's about web application vulnerabilities. In fact, about 67% of all vulnerabilities disclosed in 2007 has something to do with web applications. Okay? So that's why the Italian bank attack happened, because there's a cross-site scripting error. So using Web 2.0 technologies and consumer technology exacerbates the risk factor, because developing applications, and probably most of you develop code, secure AJAX, Flash, REST code is just difficult to do. Secure testing is more difficult because the asynchronous nature and multi-threading nature. SOA security is still complex. We don't yet have a good grasp on web services security. People have been talking about researching about it for a long time. There's still not a good way to deal with SOA security. There's no reliable way to understand third-party components. XML gateways just have not delivered the promise that is supposed to deliver. Rich content screening is expensive and non-reliable. So if I download a QuickTime movie and it has a children in it, 80% of the time today I would not discover it unless that children is well known and the signature has already been discovered. So for application security at the very high level, if you develop your own application, this is the picture you should keep in mind. In design and development, you should do threat modeling, design review, and static analysis of your code. Okay? Static analysis for code vulnerability is incredibly important because 75% of vulnerabilities arise during development rather than other phases. And during QA testing, you should do black box testing, pen testing, and security testing of your code. And it doesn't end there. A lot of people talk about development lifecycle ends at the end of release. During deployment, during the live production of the application, you have to continue to do pen testing of the code and potentially using web application firewall to provide you real-time protection. So some information resources for application security, some from our firm, some from others. Actually, Open Group is working on a Secure Enterprise 2.0 working group, which is exactly talking about standards that the community should develop for enterprises to adopt consumer technologies. Vendors like Google should consider joining this type of working group because it's all user-oriented, and users can tell you what they want in terms of standards and working, working platforms. So recap. What it means for consumer-facing service providers like you guys. What it means, the consumerization trend. Should consider adopt open standard interfaces, will attract content providers and give them control of application and data provisioning, provide them with service and activity visibility, right? And give them the capabilities to define control policies. That's very important. You have a language so that they can say, this is my corporate control policy, and this can be enforced by you. But it has to be a way for them to define that policy. And if you can, seamless integration with corporate web services will be plus. Again, I put this in because this is one thing that I think the service providers like yourself, like Yahoo, like other companies should consider talking to. What it means for content providers. New viral channels, new marketing, new revenue opportunities. They should decouple back-end applications from the web services front end to give a little bit of compartmentalization for security purposes, and adopt open standards for web services to talk to the service provider like yourself. Work with you guys to gain appropriate authentication and authorization controls. Okay? And articulate policies to service providers. What it means to IT staff. This is something that you guys may not care, but a lot of my customers do. Just reiterate content governance, application security, we talked about, and invest in identity management beyond federation. Okay? So this is basically recaps what we talked about so far. Just one more thing before we leave. We pulled CIOs and asked them if they're more or less likely to adopt Web 2.0 or consumer technologies if they come in the suite rather than point products. Okay? Overwhelmingly, 74% says we're more likely to adopt them if they come in the suite. So what does that mean for security professionals? If the consumer technology is going to converge, suite of consumer technologies, that means potentially protection technology will converge as well. So you should focus on protection stacks, not individual protection tools. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you. And do we have time for a question or two? What? Question, yes.
So even though CIOs talk about suites of applications,
Right.
the state of the web is you go to Google for your search, you go to Yahoo for your mail, you go to Facebook for your social experience. So consumers have spoken differently than what CIOs grand vision is.
Yeah, right.
So
So
how do you reconcile that? I mean, if you believe that the consumer world has it right.
right. So the question is, from the consumer standpoint, consumer goes to Google for search, goes to Facebook for social networking, and they have a set sites to go to. The CIO standpoint, the CIO says we're going to adopt consumerization tools if they come in a suite. So I think what we're talking about is consumer tools are slightly different. So there's consumer interface experiences, such as going to Google for search, going to Facebook for social networking. But there are other tools consumer also use, right? Other tools such as my phone, right? And other tools such as IM, and not necessarily Google Chat. I may have AOL, right, on my desktop. All these tools are considered under the consumerization, the consumer technology umbrella, right? Basically, what the CIO is saying is that I'm more likely to endorse these technologies or these different services being adopted in my enterprise if I don't have to individually manage them. Okay? If they come in a suite, just give you an example, if AOL and Facebook is one suite tool, let's say, okay? Sure, I don't have to manage them individually. I'm more likely to have them all together than separately. So that's not a surprise to you, right? So that's not in conflict with what the consumers are saying. Okay? You have a question?
So, I mean, you've got a very sort of rich and compelling vision, but yet there's some very significant challenges ahead
Right.
of us. Do you sense that we'll overcome those challenges, and will it be a 4 to 5 year thing, or is it going to be a 10 to 20 year thing?
Oh, no. The question is this vision going to be a 4 to 5 year thing or 10 to 20 years thing? It's definitely not 10 to 20 years. Hopefully, it's not even a 4 to 5 years thing, right? So I gave you some examples of companies already starting to build serious applications on top of collaboration technologies. It's debatable whether you say collaboration is definitely a consumer tool or not. These companies are not alone. So we know companies are building widgets and gadgets like Random House is for serious business purposes. And a lot of companies are either on board with the idea or they're investigating it very proactively, okay? So my vision is 18 months. We're going to get to probably 3/4 of that vision, okay? And perhaps 2 years, we'll get to 90% there. But we're not going to get there unless the security and control issues are solved in the CIO's minds. All right? If we don't have other questions, we can conclude. Okay. All right. Thank you guys very much.